Hi, my name is Andy Schmuckler. There's an idea I've dedicated my life to getting out into the world, an idea that first came to me in 1970, uh, that has met up as one of the obstacles to getting across to people the idea that a human system has can have forces of its own, so that what happens in that system is not a reflection of the choices of the humans that are in that system, that there can be a systemic force independently of the will and the nature of the creatures in the system that determines how things will go. So the idea that I have been trying to get out there, it's the theme of that book, which is the parable of the tribes, the problem of power in social evolution. I claim to have proven such things as that the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large, that rather it is the expression of a systemic force that's emerges inevitably with the a creature starting to invent its own way of life, stepping onto the path of civilization, such that I also claim that this same idea proves that because of this systemic force that inevitably arises along with the breakthrough to civilization, it's true that any creature on any planet, regardless of its nature, that makes such a breakthrough will inevitably be compelled for the first whatever long stretch of time in its history as a civilization creating species, will be compelled to have its civilization evolve in destructive and tormented ways. That these are not reflections of the nature of the creature, but of a systemic force. And people, I have found over the years, I don't know how widespread this is, but there is a problem with, for in some people's minds, of understanding how something that people are doing, that you can see it's the whole action consists of the decisions and actions that people are making, how it's not to be understood in terms of the psychology of those people. Well, I have a an example of that that's quite dramatic. There was a psychiatrist that I worked with. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer, and he was a very smart man. And he read my book, The Parable of the Tribes, and was enthusiastic about it. And then I had the experience one day of discussing it with him. And it turned out that in spite of my efforts in that book to be crystal clear that I'm talking about a systemic force, not the nature of the creature, that he understood it all having to do with human psychology. He's a psychiatrist. He'd been working with in terms of human psychology throughout his career, and all of a sudden, this guy, me, is asking him to think about something that's true regardless of the nature and the psychology and the choices of that people, of the people. So I was really quite stunned to discover that though he had read the book, he was still interpreting everything in terms of the nature of the parts, whereas systemic forces have their own dynamic. By the way, not only do I have that book there about the systemic dynamics that emerge inevitably after the breakthrough to civilization, I also have a book called The Illusion of Choice to show that the same problem afflicts, not the same, but an analogous problem afflicts the free market system that Milton Friedman wrote about as free to choose. My book is called The Illusion of Choice because the system has a dynamic of its own. And yeah, there are consumers and producers that are making their own choices, but the system is such that it produces predictable outcomes that are a function of the logic of the system. And we in the United States pay a price because we ignore that too much and we don't adequately supplement the market with decisions that we make, that we actually make a choice to work against the blind spots of the market system, which continually emphasizes the things that can be bought and sold, the values of the things that can be bought and sold over those things which cannot be bought and sold. And that over time, that can have a corrosive effect on a civilization, which is evident in American history. Let me offer as a metaphor for that version of systemic forces rather than an expression of the nature of the creatures that are having to work within that system. And that's the phenomenon of people getting trampled. Imagine that we have some big nightclub that's full of people, and we look at those people and we try to think, what is the nature of these people? They're having a good time, they're dancing with each other, they're having some drinks, they're having convivial conversations. And then let's imagine that something happens that has happened historically in just such situations, that their things catch fire, and people to survive need to get out, and yet for whatever reason the situation is such that they can't get out. One of the reasons has been historically a place where the doors open inward, so as the crowd drives toward the exit, everybody eager to get out, the press of the crowd against the people at the front is such that the doors can't get open. And so you end up with a stack of bodies by those doors that would not open. And there are various other kinds of situations that are sort of like the systemic situation that puts people in a choice of having to kill or be killed. Not very long ago, in some part of Seoul, South Korea, with narrow streets and big crowds, there was a trampling incident. I don't remember how many people were killed. I think it was dozens, less than 100, I believe. But in any event, the phenomenon doesn't require a fire, and it doesn't necessarily require a building whose doors. It's just that there's a situation where people who are not people you think of as, oh, this is a trampler, but people are put into a situation where their choices have been so circumscribed into unacceptable choices that you end up with a lot of people who are dead. And some people among them, and some who maybe do get out, are the tramplers. So the survival of those who are able to trample in that situation and get out is not something that reflects on the nature of the people in the building. It's something that relates to the options within the situation. Trample or be trampled. In the case of the emergence of civilization, there's an inevitable war of all against all, which I won't go into, but it's got to do with that the path of civilization is moving out of the natural order where interactions are regulated into a disorder of anarchy, which inevitably creates a struggle for power, a war of all against all, and a non-random systemic force that says only those cultural options that are consistent with prevailing in a war of all against all will survive and spread. So that it is entirely predictable in that situation that once a species breaks out of civilization, breaks out of the natural order, breaks into the disorder of anarchy, in which only those things which will be able to prevail when some are going to be winners and some losers in that war of all against all. The system determines which of the options are going to govern that creature's future. It's going to be those things which, and we have seen in places like Somalia and Lebanon and during my lifetime, that when there's anarchy, what ends up being given a disproportionate say in how things are going to be is something you might call the spirit of the gangster. And so there is a kind of a systemic problem, just like in the situation of the trampling, where it's going to be a kind of kill or be killed. And the system dictates that those that are successful in such a situation are going to be the ones that call the shots for the future. So that's what I try in that book, and many times subsequently, to show is an inevitable result of civilization, that our ancestors in the early stages of this civilizing process were increasingly put into this position where they had to either win or be eliminated in a war of all against all. And that determined that civilization would develop in destructive and tormented ways. The system, not just the people, are the ones that determine how things go. Thanks. Take a look at my website, abetterhumanstory.org. Thank you.